Well, hello again and welcome. As with our previous guest, we have the privilege of being here at the Microsoft Executive Briefing Center, talking to some folks from MSIT on how we, Microsoft, have done some things with Azure and how we've moved through this journey of going from on-premises infrastructure into a cloud world. And I think that we face many of the challenges and dilemmas that customers see. So we have some guests that we're going to talk with on how we've overcome some of these challenges, and we'll hopefully have some applicable things that you guys can use, and how features of Azure can help in addressing security and governance concerns that many of you have.
Yep, good deal. Dog food. I like dog food.
Yep.
Some kibbles and bits, please.
So as always, I'm here with my my loyal sidekick Matthew.
Yes, I've elevated. I love it. It's good. It's good.
Yeah.
So who's our guest?
Yeah,
you want to introduce him?
Yeah, and we have Richard today from MSIT.
Yeah. How you doing, Richard?
Yeah.
Good to meet you. Oh! Man.
So I could push on it and make it a little worse too. MSIT doesn't exist. It's Core Services Engineering and Operations.
All right.
IT is it's a brand that traditionally you could say has a stigma with it, where there's less value with those functions. And really we are moving towards having engineers be part of a product group where we move things forward as part of the rest of the company and have a shared culture around engineering practices. And we don't do things that are special that require, you could say, glue on our solutions, and we can be more of a consumer of out-of-the-box features, be that early adopter and improve our products, and then get those out to the field and then showcase how we're doing, you could still say IT in the industry, and then drive better adoption. So that's the goal behind the rebranding.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, that's
I never heard that.
yeah. I never have either. But if you think about it, I mean, IT kind of does have stigmatism sometimes of being very controlling. You will follow these rules and or else type of approach. Whereas kind of embracing that agile culture is a way to kind of accelerate doing things quicker and better. And if you don't have all these boundaries that you traditionally put around it, you can allow these groups to kind of do things quicker. So
Yeah, absolutely. It's helping us move the needle much faster than in the past. With the IT culture that we had in the past, we would have these monolithic solutions, and we would push them through rigorous processes that had to be consistent, and where we would drive things together as an organization and have to worry about the laggards. And it was a very slow-moving engine, and now it's much faster as we start to federate out the functions across the organization and innovate in pockets on DevOps and Agile practices, modern engineering. These things we can accelerate on individually and then showcase those best practices and then move the entire organization.
So what do you think was the real reason behind the laggards? What was kind of their excuse to not coming along quickly versus now? You've obviously given someone either a better carrot or you've got a bigger stick. So
and what did we do historically to deploy these workloads? We joked earlier about the flighting process of click the button, deploy, and then pray.
Right.
Like what was our traditional model that we followed to?
Yeah, absolutely. So you could say that a lot of the internal controls had heavy policy on them for a good reason. I mean, we have SOX in place, for example, right? We need to audit who made changes to our financial systems and when they made them and why it was made, so we can meet those compliance standards and protect the company and protect our customers, right? And when we move forward with modern practices and we don't have these monolithic solutions, policy breaks down to the component level now. Everything isn't under SOX. If I have 10 components instead of one big MSI that I'm installing, I only need to apply SOX to the application that matters in terms of that policy, where that data is PII or it's more of a high-valued asset. That's where the policy matters and where we can put focus and make sure that we really do have things enforced that meet those guidelines. And then we can go move fast on those other components that don't have to be under that same umbrella.
Oh, so it's not the big whale of everything because, one piece has it. Now I can probably apply where it's necessary. Oh, that's very nice.
And that's something I'm sure many of our customers have challenges with also, or they have these policies they have to abide by, whether it's SOX or
Yep.
FedRAMP or whatever, that if you're focusing on just where the data's stored and
Yep.
kind of the aspects of the application or workload that touches that data, you can minimize that footprint that you have to kind of control and kind of put a lot of governance around. So,
Yep, and
okay.
it adds a lot of value to those controls as well, because when we go to look at the data that's under scrutiny or the audit of the changes that were made for a specific application,
Yep.
it isn't a monolithic application that represents a larger service. It's a very focused component. So they're able to do a better job in terms of monitoring those controls.
So that had to be a huge cultural change in a lot of your audit and scope and people, how they viewed things, right? There's probably a lot of conversations around discussions of saying, well, we used to see it this way, but now we're going to shrink this. Probably got a lot of yays. But then a lot of people felt like, well, what about all this risk, right? You probably had some naysayers, some people that kind of dug in a little bit,
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely the two schools of thought in terms of centralization and decentralization.
Sure, okay.
Where I've seen the naysayers push is in terms of the solutions that must be adopted. Here's the specific tool, and here's how it's going to integrate with our services, and here how it's customized for our workflows. That's where there's the you could say overstepping the bounds of centralization. However, what's really good and where I'm seeing the organization move is centralization in terms of what is the outcomes. So if I go look at like our organizational dashboard in terms of our metrics and see where we're at from a health perspective or our engineering fundamentals, I see things like security remediations or code coverage. There still are some things in there that specify specific tools where we don't have other innovations available. So for example, like with CredScan for secrets, looking in source code, right? But there's probably nothing out there that says we couldn't use something else as long as the outcome is still obtained, where we don't have we have zero secrets in our source.
Right.
Okay. So it sounds like that, kind of gone from minimizing the footprint of stuff that we have to govern and put policies around, and then, that's kind of step one, and then we have the tools and automation that exist to be able to help make, our business teams, functional teams that are releasing solutions or workloads more agile. So why don't we talk a little bit, unpack that a little bit more and kind of talk about what exists in Azure to be able to allow these teams to be able to accelerate, their time to market or their ability to release things.
Yeah, so you could say that Microsoft has embraced open source in the last few years.
Crazy.
With rigor,
crazy
right?
talk.
Everyone's aware of it, and it's having a lot of impact in the industry and as well as internally in Microsoft.
Yeah.
So my team specifically just started using Windows containers, which is internal, but using Docker. And that's more open source. And we're using that to take some of our legacy components where we don't want to go rewrite them entirely from the ground up, containerizing them and throwing them in Azure Service Fabric cluster. And the engineering effort for that is much less, and we get off of those classic resources, and then we're more secure, and our density's up, so our cost goes down. So those types of patterns are what's really helping us.
So huge benefits there. Now you've removing the needs to patch and maintain infrastructure. We talked a little bit about this in our earlier conversation. That once you deploy a workload and kind of the IaaS model or mentality, you have stuff you need to take care of the care and feeding of. So moving to these platform services, a la Service Fabric, Kubernetes, AKS, services where you can kind of containerize your application, you can take advantage of the infrastructure at a more dense manner to be able to reduce costs, and then also reduce the amount of work you have to put into taking care of that.
How does this work for then even too, like third party, right? So you get a lot of third party, you obviously can't rewrite. So how about, some of those pieces, I'm sure Microsoft is using other other vendors' products, right? So probably some elements there that made it easier for you guys too, or?
Yeah, ISV solutions that we bought off the shelf.
Yeah, I mean, we use GitHub, obviously, for a lot of our experimentation.
Right.
When we want to go external and we want to share source, we use GitHub. So that's now obviously on its way towards being more of an internal, but it's been open for a long time. In terms of the extensions within VSTS or now Azure DevOps, there's a lot of third-party components that have been published, and we work with our, you could say, centralized IT VSO team that is now managed by CSE&O to enable those extensions on our account and then light those up. So what's a couple good examples? well, RMO is internal, CredScan we use. There's AZSK, which is now published externally.
Okay.
We use that to look.
What does that one do?
So that one we go in, it scans our subscriptions, and then at the resource group level or the sub level, and it looks for vulnerabilities of those resources we've deployed to the cloud. And it'll detect those vulnerabilities, such as if, let's say a really good high-level example is if we've enabled HTTP instead of just HTTPS.
Gotcha.
Okay.
And then that'll get flagged, and then we can go in and remediate those, redeploy the resources the next time with those ARM templates where we have that remediation built into the template, and we don't have to worry about it moving
Oh,
forward.
that's nice. Cool.
Yeah, and it identifies
And that
those.
can be released publicly at some point?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it's out there in the marketplace.
So that's an example of these governing, these guardrails, if you will, that we put in place to try to protect our business units from doing
Yeah.
things that they shouldn't, but still allowing them to move as quickly as necessary to be able
Yeah.
to accelerate their time to market by eliminating the need to have the central IT organization have to intervene and kind
Yep.
of review things and bless it to actually deploy. So,
Yeah,
okay.
yep.
Now I have a question. So we're talking about these components in this journey and whatnot. Where was the effort in the time spent to develop the boundaries, right? So we talked about now guardrails. That's probably a long pole in the tent, right? So can you share some of that, how that went? And
Yeah, so after dev and test combined, there was greater accountability on the quality of that code, and there was greater awareness in terms of what it takes to deliver quality software. It took a long time to get there. And now as we transform again, there's two things that were combined. There's more of the operations model or that service engineering, as well as release management. So from a policy standpoint and from a SOX compliance view, we have this rule in place where those that develop the software are not the ones that deploy the software.
okay.
That's very counter to a DevOps model,
Yeah.
right? Where you have engineers who are writing the code and checking in multiple times a day potentially, getting it into the environment, flighting it, looking at those results and deciding to keep it or not, right?
Yeah.
So if we have these types of policies in place, we really need to reduce where we entertain those policies, and that's where componentizing, the things I mentioned earlier, help in that manner.
Yeah.
And also, it helps build that quality into the release and the deployment pipeline.
So who does the deploy? So is it tools? Are we using CI/CD pipelines? Okay.
Azure DevOps.
Okay. Awesome.
Oh, like
okay.
that was just easy.
Yeah,
You should have
yeah,
known that.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I suspected that might be the case.
Oh,
But-
Yeah.
Nice try.
Yeah, exactly.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So we have a full CI/CD pipeline where we build and release through Azure DevOps.
Now that just didn't magically appear overnight. So I'm trying to draw out a little bit here of just the
Yeah.
pain that the organization may have felt, or did just because the nature of Microsoft's mentality and culture and what we do was it very easy? Because a lot of customers look at it and they go, "That's the whale I don't want to eat," or they just see a mountain and they're like, "This is an easier path, right? I can still maintain my structure, and I'll try to bend Azure to my will," and we see a lot of crying at the end, but. So just give us some insights a little bit too. Just prepare yourself, right? This is a journey.
It's absolutely yeah. If you take a monolithic build, which is what we had before, a lot of integrated components that are heavily coupled with one another, and you attempt to move it forward with the DevOps model, the amount of knowledge that one person needs to have needs to be very high. They need to be very effective across the entire domain of what they're working with. Also, the tools that we use, like HP Fortify, for example, they need to work against a very large project, a solution that has 30, 40, 50 projects in it. And often those are challenges that these tools that we have in our CI/CD pipeline, they can't meet the needs of. So we have to do one-off processes where we run the tool, separate out the projects, run it, and then we go and deploy once we've met compliance. So it takes a dedicated investment, and it's a long journey to break up these applications into smaller components. And that's the journey we've been going through over the last few years, is to take our monolithic source and slowly break it down into smaller components, more enterprise services, more API focused, and then get those to be in an agile state where we can just engineer with DevOps. And we have a separate process for that versus our monolithic larger solution. So we deploy on demand with what we have that is full CI/CD with DevOps, with Azure DevOps. Our more monolithic solution we deploy at the end of every sprint, which is 2 weeks.
Okay. So I was working with a customer who had their ISD, and they have some solutions that they deploy and publish, and they had a single Visual Studio solution with tons of projects in it.
Right.
And it sounds like very much what you just described is equivalent to what the state that they were in. And when you look at automating, deploying that, now you have this really tightly coupled dependency tree between all of these projects. You have this project depending on the other project, and it's really easy to do when you build it through MS Build on a on a big beefy build box or on a developer's machine. But when you want to componentize the deployment of that, you make a change to one piece of it, and you want to reduce the amount of testing effort required across the entire set. You're just changing one bit.
Right.
That's a good way or that's a problem rather that other customers have encountered as well. So, so how are we doing that? Is that just kind of just biting off one project at a time, trying to componentize as much as we can? And
Yep. So we look at where's the debt. What are the things that are the most difficult to test, that represent the highest risk, or what are the projects that we change the most frequently? A lot of our business rules where we need to go in and maintain these rules. Those are the things that we go after first. We pull them out, deprecate the old code base, get a separate build in place for this component, map it to a new component ID, so that way we can track it for compliance reasons as needed, whatever umbrella it falls with under. And then we engineer that with rigor. The legacy, at that point, we turn it off for that feature set, and we move forward only with those items that we haven't pulled out yet.
So the cost. This is going to be another part of the thing, is a lot of customers go, well, the cost to do that journey is too high. Because they either don't have a good understanding of what their costs are today, and then how to project the future costs, for that return.
Or the example of the customer I just highlighted, where they want to move to the cloud, and they're like, well, we have this massive code base, it's going to cost us
there's a dollar,
billion dollars.
There's a price tag on it that they either see as insurmountable, because their vision's too short. They don't see the longer view, right? Or to your point, the debt is just like, well, it's been running for 20 years. Why do I need to touch it now?
Yeah.
Right? There's no compelling reason to move that forward.
Yeah.
So Microsoft we didn't just decide yesterday to go,
Right.
oh, you know what, this would be a great idea. Let's just gut all that and redo it, right?
Yeah. Well, if you break down costs, there's a lot that goes into it. It's not just the hard dollars; it's the soft dollars, and those are the ones that really matter. If we think about the implications of people and how an engineering organization wants to grow, we want top talent.
Oh, yeah.
So if I'm going to force an engineering team to use old tools and old processes and they have less control, I'm not going to get the best engineers.
Well, you'll get me. But you may not get Brian. Yeah,
that's right. So that directly translates to one of the soft costs.
Yeah.
Also, there's risk. So if I have a very monolithic solution and I'm not going to invest in componentizing those areas where we make a lot of changes, I can't as rapidly test those changes and verify that we're good, or experiment with those components that do experience more changes faster. I have to accept the risk that these are harder to test and get them into production and pray. Like we talked about earlier. Just hope,
Yeah. Okay.
Interesting. Okay.
So anything else that you think would be, exciting and applicable to kind of talk about, our journey and moving some of those applications? And
I think one thing that we're being cautious of, really cognizant of at the organizational level, and it's striking a balance, is that IT glue in terms of customization to make things work where we have unique policies for a very large organization.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I think that's one of the other major excuses is we're not like everybody else. You don't know who we are. I'm a bank, I'm a hospital, I'm a whatever, fill in the blank, right?
Yeah.
I'm unique, but I think what people don't realize is, to your point, uniqueness is not a barrier.
Right.
It shouldn't be a barrier.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I love coming to meet with you guys and showcase what we're doing.
Yep.
If we're all proprietary, I can't do that, right? I can't talk to a customer and tell them how to take advantage of Azure and componentize and use Windows containers, for example. If we have a pipeline that's very specific and unique to us, it really takes out that value and our ability to have an impact in the industry.
Yeah, and quite honestly, to our earlier conversation we had this morning, that just shows the agility of Azure to be able to accommodate the plethora of different types of industries and customers that are out there. We're able to use it ourselves. Certainly, customers can as well. So
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I think one other thing too is just understanding is another soft measure of cost is what does it take to run our services?
Yeah.
And what is the cost per?
Yeah.
With a lot of our monolithic solutions where we're integrated across multiple tiers of applications, it's very difficult to understand what it is to do, the cost is to do business with the customer.
Yeah.
For each of these transactions, because it hits multiple systems, multiple components, and it's very difficult to measure. So as we break out these capabilities and we build experiences on top of these capabilities, it's now becoming much easier to understand what it takes to run these services and what the cost is per, where we don't have to support legacy code and monolithic solutions just to run one little tiny feature for a customer.
I get a feeling that there was a lot less of paralysis through analysis to do something first, which was just take some trust and some strategy to it, obviously, but go ahead and commit to that if we fix this, we're going to know more information. We're going to have better, we're going to be more in touch with what IT is doing in the transactional cost, right?
Yep.
Versus have some customers who go, well, I want to understand it before I commit to it. And they get tied down in a bog of despair and misery, and they never come out of it, because they're like, well, it's too hard. Push it away.
Yeah, I understand that comment is basically the intersection of modern engineering practices and Agile. We don't have a large project that's multi-year, multi-month. We basically do something small that's in the backlog within the span of a sprint, and we learn from it, and we go directionally from there in terms of adjusting our roadmap. We learn as we go.
You're exhausting 2 or 3 years' time to find out that a misdirection was made, and you can course correct quicker.
Yeah. So many of our customers, our organizations are waterfall based, right? I mean, they think in that mindset and have for decades because where they came from, IT was expensive, so let's make sure every penny we spend delivers some type of value.
And that's how you end up with those solutions with 200 projects.
But there's a lot of throwaway work in that approach.
Totally.
We only look about 2 sprints ahead in terms of the work that we have clarity on what we're going to execute on, because the industry changes so fast. New requirements come in, or we might bring in a new partner and decide that we want to adopt them, and that might be more important than what we have in the backlog right now. So there's
no new Azure feature.
Exactly.
We get those once a year, right?
I do have the feature timeline favorited. I mean, that's the innovations are rampant, which is awesome. It's great. And that's also just from the people perspective in terms of people management. That is super refreshing as well for people on the team. The pace of the industry, I thought, would be a barrier for us.
It keeps them motivated.
It does. It keeps them motivated, and I'm able to bring in people with diverse skill sets, and they can acquire new technology just as fast as anyone else on the team because it's all new.
Every day.
It does.
I don't have to be the SME anymore, and I am God, and whatever technology. Now we all are learners, constantly learning, right?
Yeah.
To throw that one out there. So just one for me over here.
Well, cool.
Yeah, very cool. I had one other thing is, and it was in that kind of space of, as things are changing and evolving and whatnot, there's a bit of it is, well, I don't need to be an innovator. My industry is a slow mover to get. I'm going to call out healthcare, right? Healthcare oftentimes take a backseat because they take the patient risk model and they lay it over everything. And while they tend to have a lot of innovations, talk and whatnot, they're not an innovating industry, right? They are in the bog. They're in the bog of misery of everything has large technical debt, right? A lot of their EMR systems are billion-dollar investments. Then they have data systems that are also in the hundreds of millions of dollars. So did Microsoft have a parallel with kind of the the healthcare industry from an IT perspective, internal IT?
Yeah, I think there was. I think the drivers were a bit different, though. My perspective is that was more of a funding reason.
Well, right.
Investing in these tools that were not external and not going to be consumed by our partners.
Right.
And not going to drive the industry in terms of
it
development practices. Yeah, exactly. But nowadays the industry is innovating so fast, and so are the threats that we're faced with every day, and they're innovating. And if we don't innovate at the same pace, we're the ones that are going to be compromised.
That's not good. Great.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you very much.
All right.
Thanks, James. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Good time. Thanks.
All right. Thanks.